Do you ever have the feeling that government should do more to combat climate change, that should be supporting industry better and making sure the right decisions are made at the right time? Well, I'm here at the Paris Air Show 2025 and I've gone right to the source and met with Clean Aviation. Clean Aviation is the fund that was set up by the EU to make exactly that happen, to support sustainable aviation. Let's hear what they've got to say. Gaia, Regina, Nicoloso, thank you so much for finding some time here at the wonderful Paris Air Show. And you're actually responsible for this fantastic trade fair booth. So firstly, I take my hat off to you. It's such a fresh and pleasant place to be. But do you want to tell the people who are listening who you are, who you work for, and what you do there?
Absolutely. Thank you for this interview, for this opportunity. My name is Gaia Regina Nicoloso, and I work as a communication assistant at Clean Aviation, so I'm part of the communication team. Personally, I'm responsible for events and for stand exhibitions like this one here at the Paris Air Show. So for me, it's a great pleasure to be here. It's the second event that I'm doing in Paris, so it's the second edition of the Paris Air Show where I'm participating and being responsible for the stand.
Well, I mean, it's an absolutely wonderful trade fair booth, as I say, and this is the 100th year of the Paris Air Show, so it's a special event, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But tell us a little bit more about clean aviation. I mean, this is a topic that's so close to our heart at Progress Factors, but before I describe it, maybe you could describe what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Clean Aviation is a public-private partnership. It's an initiative of the European Commission, and our objective is to promote research and fund research with both public and private funds to support research on technologies for sustainable aviation.
Excellent. And I know you've got some pretty big goals that you're trying to achieve. We've got the Paris Agreement, we've got the 2050 goal. At the moment, it's looking bad. I mean, the world has warmed up over 1.5 degrees, but do you think we have hope? Do you think there's a good chance that we're going to be able to hit those Paris Agreement targets?
We cannot afford not to have hope. The whole community, so NGOs, politicians, countries, at the European level, at national level, companies, industries, everyone needs to collaborate, really put an effort, because we cannot afford not to find a solution, and the only way we can do that is by working together.
Well, this is so close to our heart with the collaboration. What we always say at Progress Factors is we say everything we need to save the planet has already been invented. We just need to work together, and then we can combine all those technologies, all the knowledge, all the skills, and also all the finances to be able to do that. How do you feel about that?
I feel that we need both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. The responsibility, I would say, is equally in the hands of the politicians and in the governments, also at the European level, but it's also in the responsibility of the individual citizens. It's too easy to say, it's up to the politicians to implement laws to make things change. But a lot of responsibility lies in the hands of the individual citizens. With their actions, they can implement on the day-to-day life. So I think it's pretty split, the responsibility, and we all have our part to play.
Okay. No, I totally understand what you mean by that, and completely agree as well. We all have to do our thing, but what your thing is communication, right? Mm-hmm. That's your job here. So the role of communication with this very important topic. I mean, you only have to walk around the air show here, and compared to Farnborough last year or the ILA in Germany last year, you see there's a lot more stands that are pushing military and less stands that are pushing sustainability. So it must be hard for you at the moment to get that communication across.
Yes, for the Clean Aviation, we are specifically supporting civil aviation. This is the technologies that we are doing research on, so this is our what we are working on. However, the technologies we are developing together with our members, almost all of them, they are up to dual use as well. So the technologies can be used both on civil and on military as well. But yeah, it's impossible to deny that it is definitely concerning the great attention that is going towards military, although we understand why it's needed.
I understand what you're saying, and tell me about the role of communication generally for clean aviation. I mean, you've got to get the message out there so that people like me and other companies and individuals know that this opportunity is there, right?
Yes, so for me it was a journey. I come from public relations and European politics, so how did I even land in aviation? It's actually an absolutely exciting environment. super fast-paced. Things are happening all the time, and it's full of people that are absolutely passionate about their job. So this is exciting for me to work with engineers that are so passionate and dedicated. It's really important to have solid people in the comms team that are dedicated as well, because engineer works on technologies, but how to transmit their progress, their research to the public. We are not only talking with engineers and with companies, we talk with politicians, we talk with civil associations, we talk with common people, and we need to find a way to translate, not from one language to the other, but from engineers to understandable English, what they are working on. So I would say this is as comms team, our biggest challenge, but also our privilege and our daily job.
Wow. And is there a particular project you're particularly proud of, or something that you think is really funky? What's the one where you said, oh, this is really cool, I can't wait to communicate about this?
I would say probably the Open Fund project, so the RISE project that is being developed and led by Safran and GE Aerospace. It's a project that started in Clean Sky, then went on Clean Sky 2, and now in Clean Aviation. So over 10 years of work by a consortium that is made by more than 40 entities all across Europe. So it's a very exciting project. It's lowering the emissions of CO2 up to 30%, and when using SAF, up to 80%. So it's a very exciting project. We are very proud of it, and we cannot wait for that to be placed on an aircraft in the future.
Because I know you're looking to actually replace 75% of the current aircraft fleet by 2035, I think, or?
Yeah, our goal is to see new fleets and new technologies up in the skies in 2035.
Okay.
So let's see what technology is bringing up, and what are the new solutions that academia and industry are finding together.
All right. Well, Gaia, Regina, thank you so much for finding the time for us today. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the work you're doing here. It's nice to see that there are organizations who are helping us to actually combat climate change, to do that in a profitable way, instead of just greenwashing, which is a waste of everybody's time. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. This is our job and our passion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sébastien Dubois, thank you so much for finding some time here at your wonderful stand for Clean Aviation at the Paris Air Show. Clean Aviation, who doesn't want that? Could you tell us a little bit more about who you are, the organization you work for, and maybe also how it all got started?
Thank you very much, and indeed Clean Aviation is a very nice public-private partnership. I'm Sébastien Dubois, I'm the head of program development and communications within this organization. And so you can wonder, what is our role? Our role is to support the transition of the aviation sector towards carbon neutrality. That organization, Clean Aviation, was set up in 2021 following the successor of Clean Sky 1 and Clean Sky 2, which started in fact in 2007 and Clean Sky 2 in 2014. It is an initiative from the European Commission in order to support achievements of the aviation sector towards the Green Deal objective, towards carbon neutrality. And it's important to remind that all the aviation sector is fully committed to transition to carbon neutral aviation. Just a short words for people who are not familiar. Since the 50s, the aviation sector improved by more than 80% the efficiency of the aircraft. So it's just to figure out that this is something where the aviation sector is largely committed. And we, Clean Aviation, together with the industry members and the union, are committed to develop the disruptive technologies that have potential to reduce carbon footprint and greenhouse gases emission by no less than 30%, in order to have product into service by 2035. Because if we want to accelerate the transition towards carbon neutrality, we need to provide new solutions onto the market that have the potential to significantly reduce the greenhouse gases emissions. And you could wonder, is it the sole way to reduce carbon neutrality? No, it's not the sole way. The way to transition towards carbon neutrality is a combination of various solutions. One is the technology, the one I've just mentioned, and we'll come back on that in a more detailed manner. The second is improving operations in the sky. Why is it important? Because on one hand, the more we go, the traffic grows by more or less 3 to 4% on a yearly basis, and we need to accommodate in the sky with more and more aircraft which are operated. And if we want to optimize the way they work, we need to work on optimized solutions that have potential at point in time to reduce from 6 to 12% the overall efficiency of the system. This is the second element.
6 to 12%.
6 to 12% is the target we have by 2050 in terms of contribution or potential emission reduction from the operations. And the third one we are used to seeing is what we call the sustainable aviation fuel. What is this sustainable aviation fuel? Or in fact the fuel which are produced in fact either from the biomass, not the one which is used for food, not at all, but all the in fact the waste and so on and so forth, or which are produced in a synthetic manner by capturing CO2 on one end and combining CO2 with hydrogen in order to produce synthetic fuel. And this one has the potential to reduce emissions by 50% by 2050 on condition that we are capable to produce, we are capable to produce it at the right price. And so far, it's a big challenge because that fuel are 10 times more expensive than the existing one. And that's why the better savings is the energies that we do not use. This is why Clean Aviation is investing on technologies with potential to significantly reduce emissions and reduce consumption. And this is what we aim at.
Absolutely, and this is a subject that's very close to our heart. So my company, Progress Factors, we actually were one of the sponsors of the IATA's very first Sustainable Aviation Fuel. It was the very first symposium that they organized, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, meanwhile, in Madrid. And it was very interesting to be there. And you could hear about the SAF refineries that are required. I can't remember how many, but it was an enormous number, like 50 refineries. They take at least 5 years to build, and we need them by 2035, I believe, in order to hit the 2050 target. What I have to say, what I took away from that trade fair was everybody on a personal level was motivated. It was an absolutely exciting situation to be in an electric room where everyone said we have to do something. But it kind of felt a little bit like everyone was waiting for everyone else to do the first thing. The investors, the banks, the governments, the aircraft carriers, the leasing companies. Everyone was kind of waiting for somebody else to promise, we're going to buy all this fuel, okay, then we'll build a refinery. Or we need a price, okay, then we'll commit to buying the fuel. And it kind of went round in circles a little bit. How do you feel about that? Do you see any progress now?
Your point is totally valid, in fact. There are a lot of people expecting the solution to come to the market in a magic way, but it will not happen in this way. Just one figure, 2024, 0.5% of the fuel was sustainable. So you see 0.5%. And so the way we need to do is to create market conditions for that sustainable aviation fuel to scale up and to develop at the right price. And for that, there are a combination of factors. Either you rely on the private investments and you expect from the market to provide solutions. This is not sufficient. What the European Union has done, they put in place a new regulation called Refuel EU, which has the objective to progressively put some sustainable aviation fuel mixed with the Jet A fuel in order to have a mix of two with a certain percentage. Objective is 2% by 2030. And to gradually increase the percentage up to 70% by 2050. This is one element, but this is not sufficient. We need also to invest on the scale-up and the delta price of such a fuel on the short term, because we know it will be more expensive. And if we do not compensate for the next 2 to 5 years, this will not happen. And we need also to create market conditions for the fuel makers to invest significantly. This is the sole way we'll be capable. And the last point is that we need to work on the solutions, because so far it looks obvious what the Jet A, the fuel is, because there are only limited players. Tomorrow the market will be diverse. So we need to work on the requirements, on the nature of the fuel, and the way in fact it will accommodate with the engine generation. Another important element, so far most of the aircraft, if not all, will be compatible to operate with 50%, 50, of sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. So assuming for a moment that such a sustainable aviation fuel is available, we would be able to accommodate and to put it directly, because it's what we call drop-in. Drop-in means needless to change or to adapt the aircraft. The aircraft is already capable to. So this is a very important element. So you see a lot to happen in that field, with a lot of incentives.
We're basically looking for a disruptive ecosystem and less of a disruptive technology, right? In that case, what we're saying, we drop in, the aircraft can stay pretty much the same. We just need to make sure the fuel is there.
For the existing aircrafts. But bear in mind what I said just before, the fuel will be more expensive. When you know that when you consider that 40% of the price ticket for a flight is based on the price of the fuel, and assume for a moment that that fuel price will increase at minimum by 3 if we are competitive, you can already figure out what will be the impact onto the demand and on the flight ticket. That's why this is where the technology comes into the big picture. We need to develop technologies which are quite efficient in terms of fuel consumption. And that's why we have two paths. On one hand is developing a portfolio of technologies that have potential to be far more efficient. We, Clean Aviation, are targeting a 30% improved performance in terms of fuel consumption by 2035 in order to accompany the growth and the increase of the sustainable aviation fuel mix, in order to preserve that competitiveness and to arrive at the rendezvous when the availability of the SAF is now guaranteed with the right price. We can then compete and preserve the economics and the development of the sector.
It's so relieving to hear that people are thinking about this, and it sounds like you have a plan. Sometimes you feel so frustrated, when you look from the outside and you say, hey, we could do everything. Now, I already mentioned to one of your colleagues, we have the opinion that everything you need to save the environment has already been invented. I started my career off mid-90s in the car industry. I remember I worked at BMW in 2000. We had hydrogen vehicles driving around Munich. Test vehicles, 7 Series that ran on hydrogen. When I started mid-90s in the UK, I remember we had cars that were in Brazil working with organic fuels, so Repsol, things like this. And it's so great to see that this is actually coming through now, because I think you guys have got a target to replace all the current aircraft, or 75% of the current aircraft in the sky by 2035. Is that correct? That's a huge number, huh?
So if you now look at the big picture, if we want to transition to carbon neutrality, we need, in fact, to develop new technologies. Our goal, Clean Aviation, is to invest in technologies which have the potential to reduce by no less than 30% greenhouse gases emissions. This is one thing. Having the right ideas, you need to further mature these ideas and to demonstrate the viability of the applicability of such a solutions. Exactly what you have said. It's not because you have a brilliant concept that concept can be manufactured and deployed onto commercial products. That's why we act on two sides. On one hand, we push the boundaries to demonstrate the performance which is achievable as compared to our objective, one thing. And secondly, we invest on the maturation of the technologies. By maturation, we mean, in fact, capability to install such a technology onto an aircraft, to test that technology onto an aircraft, all the viable economic conditions associated to further inclusion of such technology onto a product, but also the capability to produce. Because in fact, we just need to pause for a moment and to contemplate what is the situation of the aviation sector. Today, Airbus, just one figure, this is more than 8,000 aircraft which are in the order book. In fact, the delivery is more or less more than 700 aircraft per year. So you see there is a big gap. And our role is to make sure that we can invest in technologies which have potential for high production rates at the same time in order for deployment. Because to come to your second question, if we want to have an impact, we need to have solutions which provide, in fact, efficiency onto products. And our goal is to make sure that technologies have potential to come to the market by 2035.
Okay.
And the last point is to make sure that we can renew the existing fleet. And this is indeed this is correct what you said. From 2035 to 2050, our hope, our aspirational goal, is to support the replacement of the fleet by 70% of the existing fleet, which is terrific in terms of number. Which means we need to develop technologies, but also all the production capabilities, all the high rate production schemes, which are potential to accelerate. And this is a big challenge for the whole ecosystem, and this is what we are supporting.
I mean, it really is just to sort of hammer this home to the people who are listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube. If we talk about the car industry, everyone kind of knows like a car after 10 years, well, you're probably not going to want to drive it anymore. Maybe it gets sent to, a different country where they drive with older cars. But generally cars, you're talking about a maximum 20-year lifespan, maybe 15 realistically. And when we come to aeroplanes, I mean, the average years of use of an aeroplane, it can easily be like 30, 35 years, right? So to be able to swap out the whole fleet from 2035, or a large proportion of it from 2035 to 50, that is a huge commitment.
If we want to get an impact, this is like in the car sector. You need to inject onto the market new products which have potential to significantly reduce the emissions. It's exactly what we aim at. Will it be 75%, which is tremendous? It will depend on various factors. Capability to produce, capability to order, and capability to pay. So you see, in fact, our role is to create conditions for this to happen. And then once the condition will be met, then we'll investigate with all the community at international level what could be done in order to accelerate that transition. Back to your remark, an aircraft can operate for 40 years. On average, the duration is 22 years and a half.
Okay.
It's more or less on average. So this is something important.
Oh, well, I've learned something there. Thank you very much for correcting me. So let's talk about the actual numbers now as well, because I believe this is still the case. The aircraft industry, so aviation, costs us 2% of the total CO2 carbon footprint of the whole world each year. It's only 2%. I feel like aviation gets a very bad press. If I look at the building industry, I think the food industry is 35%, just to make a comparison there. And so on the one side, I would say, well, hey, should we really be giving sustainable aviation fuel to aviation? Shouldn't we be using that for all the boats that are bringing our Amazon packages from, faraway countries to be delivered at our door? Or should we invest into aviation? I guess we have to also think about that 2% of CO2 that's being created. If it's up in the contrails in the sky, whether it's having a larger impact than a boat on the water. How do you feel about these numbers?
So the numbers you have mentioned are correct. More or less today, aviation sector accounts for more or less up to 3% of the overall CO2 emissions, as compared to the cemetery industry, which is in the ballpark of 7 to 8, as compared to all activities related to IT, the cloud. None of us are paying attention, but when sending an email, when attaching photos, we are already at 8%. So now the question is more how we will evolve with that percentage along the years. And this is something to look at. Another important element for aviation, CO2 is one thing, but we are also need to consider what we call non-CO2 effects. Non-CO2 effects are more or less the contrails. The contrails are the condensation that you can see in the sky, which are white at the exhaust of the engine, which are the combination, in fact, on some species from the exhaust, together with some ice crystals that form that contrails. And during under specific conditions, especially at night, it can create some warming effects. Today, 3% of the contrails represent 80% of the global warming effects for the aviation sector, and it accounts potentially up to 2/3 of the global warming effect of the aviation. So you see, we need to work on both, on reducing CO2 and reducing non-CO2. To your second question, the question is more where we will be in 10, 20, 30 years. And we need to make sure that aviation sector, who is committed to really transition to carbon neutrality, make investment which allow to accommodate with the growth of the traffic. Remember what I told you at the start. Since the 50s, the performance of an aircraft has increased by 80%, which means, in fact, as compared to an engine generation back in 1950, we are only consuming 20% of the energy which was required at that time. So you see the continuous effort which has been made all along the time. So it's very important. And our objective is really to transition to carbon neutrality, because first, we'll not stop traveling. Secondly, travel, in fact, is necessary to connect the different continents, the different people, for business, for wealth. And it's important for economics. Just in Europe, the aviation sector represents 15 million of jobs in aviation at large, 15 million, and is worth 1.2 trillion euros of revenues on a yearly basis. So you see, and it accounts for less than 4% of the European GDP. So we cannot afford stopping aviation. And when you compare to boats and others, we aviation are part of what we call hard to abate sector. Because, for example, for the car industry, we don't need sustainable aviation fuel. We have other alternative solutions like the electric car. I will not further develop all the problems associated to that, but there are solutions. For the aviation sector, there are no other solutions than using the sustainable aviation fuel or other source of energy such as hydrogen. But for hydrogen, it requires much more time.
I understand exactly what you mean. So this hard to abate, that's the key takeaway here, is if we want to make the skies cleaner, then we need to make sure there's a priority that these technologies are available in the skies, because it's a lot easier on a heavy boat, which weighs tons, to be able to transport batteries or something similar. I understand what you're saying. Now, I'd like to be a bit conscious about time, because I know you're here at the Paris Air Show. It's a big thing for all of us, and so I don't want to go on too long, but do you know what the Colombo question is?
No, what is the Colombo question?
Did you used to watch the old 1970s TV show? I remember growing up at my grandmother's and we watched Colombo.
Ah, yes, okay.
And I don't know if you remember, he always had a friendly conversation, and just as he left, he said, just one more thing. It was the difficult question at the end. The Colombo question. Progress Factors is a small company. We help lots of big companies, so we have an insight into the world of SME, we have an insight into the world of corporate. We sometimes have the feeling in Europe that compared to, let's say, California, there's not enough done for the small, innovative companies, that it's too hard to get to this money, that there's always a bank and then another company and another company before you can actually get to be involved. We're specialists on something called OKR, and where we live in southern Germany, the state was looking to disrupt and to implement OKR and to change the world. And when we looked at the conditions, they said you have to have worked with us for at least 7 years to pitch for this. So that's not going to change the world if you work with the same partner. How do you feel about this? Is clean aviation doing anything for the little guys, for the real small innovations to be accelerated so that we can get ahead of the competition, regardless whether you see the competition as California or the competition as global climate change?
The question is quite broad and quite interesting. First of all, we acknowledge the fact that SME startups are really key in our ecosystem, because they are more or less the precursor and the one who are providing solutions which are highly disruptive, sometimes totally unusual, but at the end really necessary to push all the ecosystem. This is one thing. The second thing, clean aviation, we more or less at that time have 15% of our participants who are SMEs. Is it enough? Probably not, but this is the way it works. Thirdly, in clean aviation, we are trying to promote SMEs, but also university and academia, because both need, in fact, support on top of the larger companies who are investing in that domain. And we are trying to implement some dedicated mechanism called Fast Track, where we finance in 2 years. Fast Track means, in fact, fast to fail, but fast to succeed. And it's more or less the spirit you have in mind when you refer, in fact, towards continents, the way they proceed. This is something we want to promote. But with the aim, in fact, to really align this activity with an objective, which is our objective to support the launch of new products. And then to support maturation up to a certain point. Afterwards, where we need a large support, and we are not yet there, is how to go through that valley of death. Because for SMEs, what is vital, when you start developing nice concept, you need afterwards a lot of investment to go to the market. Mm-hmm. European Commission is fully aware. They are investigating how to provide additional support on that. We are also supporting all our ecosystem in promoting and trying to find the right schemes. European Union is developing some tools such as the Innovation Fund where they can go and apply. And we need to have in Europe a more venture capital approach. We are European, we are not American. So in terms of culture, it's not necessarily our mindset. But I fully share your views. We are aware, we try to support, we encourage in fact the emergence of new disruptive solutions, especially in the electric domain. This is where they are the most active in that field. And we need them because we need the full innovation chain to succeed. And SMEs are the one who will prove what is feasible, what is not. They will be the first one to demonstrate what we can go and achieve. They are the one pushing the boundaries and challenging, in fact, the large OEMs and providing value to that whole ecosystem. This is definitely where we need to further investigate.
Well, that's music to my ears, Sébastien. It really is. as I said already, I want to be conscious about your time. I really appreciate, that you're prepared to jump in and do this podcast with us today. I'm sure our listeners are going to be fascinated to hear this and to have the opportunity to listen to somebody like you speak, because sometimes you feel so far away, and it's great to see there are human beings that are working on making sure that we don't just greenwash, but that we actually create sustainable, profitable business models. I take my hat off to you. Thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing.
And thank you very much. I hope that you capture that we are not there to think about the things which are not concrete. We are there to invest, to support the ecosystems, to bring value to the market, to the end users, to the airlines, and probably the most important, to support the competitiveness of the European Union, because this is the great thing we have. And thank you very much for having me this opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Sébastien, and thank you to Clean Aviation.